Folks, welcome back to the culture here on the Black Star Network. Our next conversation we want to focus on the legal drama of classified documents and former President Donald Trump. As we have been seeing, folks, there has been a number of reports about this whole situation around the president returning those documents back to the hands of the National Archives. And as a result, of course, we saw that search operation going down just a couple of weeks ago. Now it's been reported. Check this out. This one blew my mind. Where we thought before that maybe it was just a few documents, it has exploded to where the president withheld over 700 pages of classified material seized from his home. Highly sensitive, national security oriented documents. 700 pages. Here's what the New York Times put out. Check this out. In the letter dated May the 10th and written by the acting U.S. archivist Deborah Steidel Wall to one of Mr. Trump's lawyer, Evan Corcoran, described the state of alarm in the Justice Department, as well as officials there began to realize how serious the documents were. It also suggested that top department prosecutors and members of the intelligence community were delayed in conducting a damage assessment about the documents removal from the White House, as Mr. Trump's lawyer tried to argue that some of them might have been protected by executive privilege. The letter, dated May 10th and written by the acting U.S. archivist Deborah Steidel Wall to one of Mr. Trump's lawyers, described the state of alarm, and it also suggested that top department prosecutors and members of the intelligence community were delayed in conducting this situation. And so when we look at how this whole thing is manifesting, I had to bring on someone that can give me some insight and that can give us some insight as to what the consequences were of this whole situation. So we're happy to have her back on the show with us, Professor Jerry Mathis Rutledge, who is a law professor as well as an attorney, and she teaches about the Constitution. She talks about executive privilege, and so we're happy to have Professor Rutledge joining us this afternoon to give us some insight on this situation. Professor, it's always good to talk to you. How are you, my sister?
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Professor, when we look at this thing, one of I think my biggest question to you is around consequences. What's the consequence of, and I know we haven't seen this before, like this case is a precedent because no president has taken official documents home after they leave the White House. But what are the potential consequences for this? Now that we know that he took a lot of highly sensitive information to Mar-a-Lago with him.
Well, we know the Attorney General is very much by the book and very methodical. So he will likely, as they continue to go through those documents, see if he has violated the law or not. We know from the search warrant that there was probable cause to believe he has violated the law, including the Espionage Act. So what could happen next would be taking the case to the grand jury, potentially he being prosecuted and potentially facing jail time. But it's important also to note that probable cause, which is basically a reasonable basis to believe the law has been broken or there's evidence of a crime at a particular place, that's a very different standard than beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's really too early to tell what's going to happen. I know there are a lot of people who want to make predictions, but we really don't know because, as you said, this is unprecedented.
So if I mean, and I know that on one side of the aisle, people are expecting him that like this could be the nail in the coffin, the Democrats, right? They're like, you know what, he's finally going to be taken down. But on the other side, for all of the things that this man has already done or has put into motion, even if he hasn't physically done it himself, but he at least put into motion or created the climate to allow these things to happen. How sure should we as the American people be about this? That there is going to be some real consequences or some real punishment on the former president?
Sadly, we can't be totally confident that anything's going to happen. This is a man who said he could shoot someone in the middle of the street and nothing would happen to him.
Famous line.
famous line, and it's been really sad and shocking how much that has been true. We know that the Justice Department and Merrick Garland aren't going to do anything until and unless all of their ducks are in a row. So that's one thing. But in
Yeah.
terms of the hopes of the Democratic Party saying, oh, you're disqualified from running, I think that is a pie in the sky dream, honestly.
Really?
Yes, let me tell you why. A couple of reasons. First of all, in terms of the public, he raised millions of dollars after the search warrant was executed. So
Right.
his people are a new definition of ride or die. Okay, so there's that aspect of it. The other is the section that he might potentially could be prosecuted under, which is section 2071. Although it has a provision that says you could be disqualified from holding office, it's the United States Constitution that says who is eligible to run for president. In fact, they tried to disqualify Hillary Clinton for the email server thing, and it didn't work because we always look to the Constitution first. And because the Constitution doesn't say anything about you can't be convicted of a crime, or 2071 trumps the Constitution, I'm pretty sure he's still going to be able to run.
Wait a minute. Hold on, Professor. Hold up. Wait a minute. Hold up. I feel like I'm living in a multiverse right now. I feel like this is a Marvel's movie right now. So you mean to tell me that he's been twice impeached? He's been considered to be the driving force behind one of the biggest domestic, I think, terrorisms and attacks on quote unquote democracy, probably within the last 50 years because of January the 6th. He's withholding presidential documents. That's all the stuff we know, right? Not even thinking about the stuff that may have happened behind the scenes and in the White House while he was there.
Right.
And you mean to tell me he is still eligible to run for office as president of the United States come 2024?
The legal process is a very slow process, and we already see him trying to use delay tactics. And even though a search warrant was issued and executed, there has been no commitment from the Justice Department that they plan to arrest him or indict him with the grand jury, any of that. So a lot of this is a process. And before then, he gets to announce whether or not he's running. And he's really, really good at politicizing these issues and claiming everything is a witch hunt. So sadly, I don't see anything in our laws that's going to prevent him from running other than the good conscience of the American people. And we see from his contributions that we're really divided on this issue.
Yeah. I
I know it's like we're in a new universe. I know it sounds crazy.
So because this puts everybody in a very unique space, right? Where now it seems like the law just doesn't apply. It seems like the law is only enforced because based upon who's in power, right? Versus like and trust and look, I want you to check me on that. I'm just saying, Professor, that if this is all happening, then why should people be concerned about quote unquote following the law? Because this is the slippery slope, I would think.
The law is slow, but they say that the arch of justice, eventually goes to the right direction. I know I'm misquoting that, but I believe eventually it's going to catch up because we see all these things coming. But you're asking me if there's a specific provision that's going to just disqualify him flat out. I don't see that. If you're asking me that, is he going to be arrested, convicted, indicted by the grand jury, then convicted before 2024? I don't necessarily see that either. So that's really the problem. Eventually, is he going to, if the government can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he actually broke the law, will there be a punishment? I would hope so, because one of the most important tenets of our government is that no one is above the law. So I wouldn't go so far as to say he's above the law, he's going to get off scot-free. I would say that number one, it hasn't been proven beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law yet. Number two, there's nothing in the provision so far that say he cannot run for president. Now, this may be a great time to maybe amend the Constitution, but it's really hard to pass any laws, much less a constitutional amendment.
Right, right. So talk to us a little bit about, his request. His team has decided to sue the FBI, if I'm mistaken, if I'm not mistaken. And then I'm starting to see even other Republican lawmakers are taking this unprecedented step of suing an agency that's a part of the intelligence community. But he's planning to sue the FBI, and he has asked for a special request to have a special master to oversee the review of the documents that were taken from his residence. Talk to us a little bit about what is that? What is the special master? What's the role of the special master, and why would he make that request?
So a special master is basically a third party attorney who's supposed to, in a very neutral fashion, look through the documents to make sure there's nothing that's privileged that should be withheld from the government. It's usually a retired judge or an attorney. And it's rare. We saw a special master issued in Michael Cohen's case when his office was searched by the FBI. A special master was granted just to make sure there wasn't any kind of confidential communications between himself and then President Trump. So that would be an appropriate use of the special master. Here, we're talking about Mar-a-Lago, the president's house. There's also a club where other people can go in and out. And we're talking about a 2-week delay, right? The search warrant was executed 2 weeks ago. And so if he was really concerned about the FBI looking through confidential information, they should have objected a long time ago before now.
Right.
Because the FBI is probably just about done looking through everything, and they've already got whatever smoking guns they're going to come up with. So that's one thing that suggests that this is really just a publicity stunt. The other thing that suggests it's a publicity stunt is the filing itself. I looked at the legal documents, and it's been heavily criticized as just a joke almost. The language seems very defensive, talking about how Trump has been treated unfairly, and they're using the FBI as a weapon, and all of these things that really don't have any legal justification. But I think the biggest telltale sign was the judge. So instead of going to the judge who issued the search warrant, which I think most competent lawyers would do, he goes to another judge who he happened to appoint. And that judge says, why are you coming to me? I don't think I have jurisdiction. Or in other words, I don't have any legal basis to hear this case. I'm not sure if I do. Tell me what jurisdiction I have. Number two, what do you want me to do about this? And number three, there's some sample motions on my website because you guys kind of messed this up. So all of that suggests that it was more important for him to file something for the public and his supporters than something that would be effective. So I think the chance of a special master being appointed are very slim. And the most that it would do is just further delay. And why does he want to delay? He wants to delay so he can keep saying, oh, I'm running for president now. This is just a witch hunt.
Right. And how does executive privilege falls into that? Because he was bringing that up as well.
So executive privilege applies to the president. Donald Trump is no longer the president. So it's kind of laughable that he's trying to claim something that just doesn't apply to him. The other thing about executive privilege, it doesn't work the way he's hoping it works. It's not a magic wand that you can say, I hereby declassify whatever I feel like declassifying. I mean, can you imagine former President Obama leaving the White House and just saying, you know what, I'm just going to declassify everything? The whole thing is absolutely ridiculous. But he tried it. And the Justice Department and the legal counsel, they've all looked at it. They laughed at it. That's probably not going to fly anywhere at all.
So, and speaking of President Obama, I got to say this. He did not have 33 million pages of classified documents. The National Archives even said that
the National
President Trump put. Yeah, I'm sorry.
The National Archives actually said that they have more documents that President Obama turned over than any other presidential library. because he
Wow.
was so dutiful with turning over 300 million emails and everything. And that's a year-long, month-long process, because you know you're leaving office eventually. But here we have a president that somehow in his brain didn't really think it was going to be over, and really does think in his mind, these are my documents. But these aren't his documents. These are the people's documents. This is the property of the United States of America.
Right. And it's just like, I'm going to take my work home. Like, bruh, you don't have a job no more.
Well, not only is he trying to take his work home, you're
He
right.
want to take it. He talking about, yo, I'm just going to take my work home for the weekend. Like, you know, you don't work here.
Well, here's the other thing I want us to look at as well. This is a person who former President Obama said had no intellectual curiosity about the job. I don't know if you remember when we were transferring power and President Obama met with the then president-elect Donald Trump, and he finally had access to all this classified information, and he was disinterested. There have been reports throughout his presidency that he just wasn't that interested in reading or knowing about all of this stuff. So it's really peculiar that a person with that kind of lack of interest would print out, because most of these documents should have been digitized, would print out all these documents and put them in boxes. So what his actual intent was, we don't know yet, but I'm really looking forward to finding out.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, let me get some thoughts from our online culture crew. Folks are checking in. And folks, you can certainly post your comments, and we'll try to get to as many as possible during this conversation with Professor Rutledge. King Lee, my guy, brother King Lee, you checked in and said, look, the orange clown should have already been charged. Trust me, if it was you or me, we would have already been indicted months ago, King. Months ago. Thank you, King Lee, for checking in. Sophia, you checked in and said, look, this is a complete breach, and there needs to be stricter rules just in case another moron gets elected again. And I think to Sophia's point, Professor, you know, do you foresee that there are going to be some new conversations about classified documents as a result of this? I mean, I know, again, this is unprecedented, but will this force the National Archives and other folks to say, you know what, we're going to have to create some new rules around this?
Absolutely. The Presidential Records Act was actually established in response to President Nixon's administration and the whole mess with Watergate, right? Because before, we relied and trusted on the president's patriotism to do the right thing. And presidents before Nixon were doing the right thing. But then Nixon comes along and says, these embarrassing documents and tapes, they belong to me. So after that administration, the Presidential Records Act was passed. So I think similarly, after all of this is over, we're going to see new legislation to make it even more clear on what a president should do, and hopefully the punishments.
Absolutely, absolutely. Coroner, you checked in and said, yet he is still unhinged and still walks the earth without consequence for any of his crimes. Yeah. That's the part. That is the part. Oh, man. Thank you so much, sis. Again, Shalinda, you said totally in a Twilight Zone. Yeah, I feel like we're in a Black Mirror, Twilight Zone, alternate reality multiverse when it comes to this guy and his followers. I can't get past this, Professor. Like, his followers, they're going all in. What do you make of that? I mean, people who often profess that they know the law, people who say that they're following the law, and then they're doing the exact opposite. How does that work?
I think it's very frightening, and I wish I had an answer for why it's happening. I mean, even in his legal filings, it seemed like a veiled threat to Merrick Garland, saying that, you know, the people are very angry and I'll do my best to try. I mean, it's just ridiculous. We've had FBI agents on edge who feel like their security and safety is being threatened. IRS is feeling concerned about safety and security, and it's all because of the power of this person's words. Words matter. Words have always mattered. Hillary Clinton said that all during the campaign, and no one listened. And his words tend to have some really, really severe consequences. Will I ever understand the nature of someone who, in spite of it all, wants to ride with Donald Trump? No, I don't understand, but I can tell you what is not the traditional things that we thought of when we thought of the Republican Party, right? It has
Right.
nothing to do with fiscal spending or, get the government out of our business. It's none of that traditional stuff or conservative values. This is something very, very deeper, perhaps even primal that's going on here. And I
Yeah.
know other people have named it as well. I think I don't know what to think of what's going to happen. The fact that he literally can control and command and influence all the other Republicans who are being elected is frightening. It's also frightening when we think of who Donald Trump 2.0 is going to be.
Right.
Because Trump had a lot of his own. You can tell someone else mentioned that he's become unhinged and people have talked about his erratic behavior. 2.0 is going to be more polished.
Yeah.
Are we ready to face a Trump 2.0? And sadly, I don't think we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Ron DeSantis is not going to be is not he's not going to make the same blatant mistakes that we see. And you know what, Professor, I'm thinking about the black political leader right now, as we wrap up this part. But thinking about the black political leader, what is one of the big things that you would word of advice that you would give to black political leadership during this time? Because just as much we've heard about Donald Trump and his things, I've constantly read about black political leadership doing everything from misappropriation of funds to other underhanded things, right? And I still believe that we just don't get the fact that even though you are in those spaces, sitting at those tables, you cannot do things the same way as your white counterpart. What word of advice as a professor, as a lawyer, and just a woman who has values? So what would you say to the next generation of black political leadership that's looking to get into these spaces and try to make a change?
The first thing I would say is don't be used. We're seeing a lot of, and I think we're going to see more Herschel Walker types,
Oh
right?
Lord.
who
Oh Lord.
who may or may not have any business near the political arena for lots and lots and lots of reasons, who are okay being used by a political party. And some people would argue that Kanye West was the same way. So I would caution my black political leaders, number one, if you're conservative and that's your party, I don't have a problem with you. I have a problem with you being used, right?
Mm,
So that's number one.
mm.
Number two, it's the whole thing we all knew when we grew up. You have to be twice as good. You really do. And I think that's one of the things that was so heartbreaking about Andrew Gilliam in Florida, right? Because he did not need to get caught up in that stuff that he got caught up in. There were so many
Yeah,
people,
that's a good point.
rallying for him and rooting for him. So you really, really have to be careful. I know that politics and power can be very seductive, but there are people out there who think that we're at war, and they're becoming more vocal,
Yeah.
more violent, and more political savvy. And we need competent people in those spaces to protect the idea of democracy that I think the African American community believes in. Clearly, the idea of democracy is not what we thought it was because people are so willing to throw it away.
Right.
But I think we who have died and bled and fought for this country do believe in democracy. We do believe in the potential of America. And we've got to fight for the potential of America for all of us and our children, not just so some particular group can be in power. So to be really, really careful. I think if you're called to do a political office now, it's a calling. It
Yep.
shouldn't just be a job or a career because the stakes are just too high for you to
Sure.
think that, oh, I'm going to get a new car or I'm going to get this big check. We need you. And if you're even thinking about running for office, most politics are local. Run for office, educate yourself, join political organizations like Win with Black Women and Higher Heights and all of that. Get involved, vote for heaven's sake. There are so many people who don't vote. There's so many of our young Black students who are apathetic, and we can't afford it.
And to that point, Professor, that's the great concern that I have, and even more so looking at the Constitution. And I know this is a big question, and you may not want to answer. We got to bring you back on to answer this one, but I think there needs to be a discussion about whether Black folks should continue to put our hopes and dreams into the Constitution. Should we continue to believe in the Constitution? Should we continue to adhere to the Constitution in a sense of, you know, this idea that we're going to create, it will be a part of a more perfect union, this idea that we're going to be a society of laws and rules, because it seems like all of these rules are being broken by those in government and in those in leadership. All those rules are being broken. And if you have a broken, you know, I was always told no leadership is sometimes better than bad leadership. And so I don't know. You could. I don't want to throw it on you like that, Professor. I want you to come back. But
I'll come
what are
back.
your
But
thoughts?
I will say this: the Constitution may be imperfect, but it's a beautiful document. It's one of the best constitutions of any nation. It is so important and so valuable. It can fit in our pocket, and so many people haven't even bothered to read it. Just
Yeah,
because
that's
there
true.
are bad people interpreting it doesn't mean you can throw the whole document away. So yes, I still believe in the Constitution. I still believe in the justice system and the belief of the American dream and democracy. And I'm not ready to give up. And I'm certainly not going to let a bunch of bullies make me give up that dream.
See, that's why I have you on here. You were prepared for that. You were prepared for it. All right, Professor, we appreciate you. Professor Rutledge, who is a law professor, USA Today columnist. She's a writer, she's a researcher, and she's a former prosecutor. And she's one of our contributors here on The Culture, here on the Black Star Network. Professor, always a pleasure. We'll certainly bring you back on. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's talk about the Sutherland Springs mass shooting, get an update from one of the